Welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure. Today I'm going to take you through some kitbashing I've done for a game called Sludge. So, as I suspect loads of you watching will already be aware, there's an indie online digital miniature magazine, wargames rules kind of magazine called Blaster, by various indie games designers, one of whom is Sean Sutter. Now, I think his main game for which he is famed is Relic Blade, which is a kind of very small scale fantasy skirmish set of rules with loads of creative mechanics, but his rule sets are really made quite unique by just being hugely festooned by amazing artwork, because he is himself the artist and he is himself the games designer. And so there he is. He basically said in one of his many, he's done a lot of interviews on podcasts and there's loads of YouTube videos of him, and he always says, look, I'm an artist. I used to do corporate pieces of art that ended up on banks' walls, which must have been reasonably lucrative, but he says, I'd rather kind of figuratively invite the wargaming community, of which I've been a part my whole life, into my living room, into my studio, and just kind of have a kind of a creative exchange. And in many ways, this little video is part of the ongoing response to Sean's outcry, because what he's done in this particular rule set is it is designed to be a kit basher's dream, because his idea was that he would get loads of Perry figures. He's never really been sufficiently interested in his historical miniatures, and he would get those Perry miniatures or whatever, and then kitbash kind of medieval bits with black powder bits. And you'll see that the game is this combo of knights and billmen and musketeers, all in a kind of World War One type grim, well, dare I say it, grim dark kind of world. Because I think in one of the interviews he explained, he's from California. There was a summer of kind of COVID and forest fires, and he just, there was a sense of the world coming to an end, and the griminess of kind of World War One and Passchendaele and the Somme and all that. And so in his alternative kind of universe, the world tree, which I think is a Viking thing, presumably, the world tree dies, and so the earth itself is dying, and all manner of different human powers are just fighting with each other in a kind of Game of Thrones type low fantasy, low magic kind of world, which all made me think of Warmachine and Hordes, which isn't quite what this is. Warmachine and Hordes used to burn my brain, maybe because I'm not that smart, but it was always very complicated. It had to be your main game. People would say you've got to keep playing the same crew in and out, really understand it, and then you'll get the most out of it. But I didn't want to get the most out of it. I wanted to just make a few fun miniatures, paint them, and then play some games with a bit of tactical decision-making open to me. And if Sean is open to this ongoing dialogue with the wider wargaming artistic community, could I just say, please, can you find a way of getting warjacks onto the table as part of Sludge? It doesn't have to be where the warcasters are somehow fueling them. Your universe is sufficiently independent to find a way of having big walkers be part of it, because I saw from one of your videos that you are now including giants and potentially tanks, and if you can include tanks, you can include warjacks. Thank you, sir. And I thought, let's just have a bit of an Easter project. I'm away from home. Let me just take away a whole load of stuff and just see, without buying anything, if I can build what I need. Because I didn't like the Frostgrave Barbarian box that I got, which I only got really for the heads. I didn't really like the Frostgrave Knights that I got. And did I mention that I have a load of Warmachine stuff? Because after Game of Thrones, it's very much a fantasy wargaming trope, which sounds great, which is great fun, to basically say, look, history unfolded in a certain way in our timeline, but imagine if you just tweak something small, like, winters just to last a lot longer because of well, my science isn't good enough to understand why the winters last longer in Game of Thrones. Presumably it's something to do with the distance of the Earth from the sun, how long it takes the Earth to go around the sun, whatever, I don't know. Anyway, but, presumably in another world, gunpowder might not be as powerful, powerful enough to kill someone, maybe get through armor, but not quite enough to knock out knights in full plate from, relevance. All manner of things, which mean that this mishmash kind of could make sense in a kind of steampunky kind of, well, neo-steampunky kind of universe, or pre-steampunk universe. And I'm not even going to pretend particularly to go into the rules in any depth. I'm sure others have covered it. But you can see there's basically an initiative phase, activate units. There are long orders, short orders. So far, nothing unusual here. I think what people have said it makes us quite distinctive is this concept of gore, that every time people take wounds or people die close to them, they start panicking or start, thinking about leaving the field of battle. And you can see there it says in the nerve phase, when a unit suffers wounds, well, everyone within 5 inches of gore has to test. And when a unit suffers wounds, the controlling player places 1 gore in contact with the unit for each wound they suffer, and eventually people will just leg it. And there's artillery and various formations, line, column, to give you a bit of a Napoleonic field, and fairly straightforward rules on terrain. And armies are not huge. You've basically got a leader with a couple of bodyguards, an officer, kind of subsidiary dude, with a bodyguard. The infantry come in groups. You're supposed to put them 3 on a base, or you can have them just grouped together, which, as you'll see, is what I do, because otherwise I'll never get around to painting them. And the infantry can either come with muskets, or you can give them pole arms. You can have up to 5 arcanists, like these low-level wizard. You can have 1 high-level wizard with a bodyguard. There are kind of Jaegers. I can't remember what these are. Those must be knights. You have knights running around smacking people. This is a kind of Middle Eastern-themed army. I don't think it's in the core rules in the magazine, but you can have a giant, you can have pieces of artillery, and you can have various types of cavalry. And that's it. So here goes my efforts. And on the subject of Warmachine, I thought that he would make a fantastic hero. One of these even holding his own flag. You can have a commander. And what I've done is I've taken an old Kador warcaster. Yes, him, Commandant Irusk. And I'm really sorry, I've realised you can't video black undercoat miniatures. They have to be white or a lighter colour. With an exquisite sword and some quite intricate armour, which I can never be bothered to paint. And I gave it an Outrider head from a Games Workshop Outrider kit. Those are the guys who, is it called enfilade? You ride up on your late Renaissance horse, English Civil War type horse, take your pistols out, go kaboom, and then ride back, reload, and rinse, repeat. But he looks kind of aristocratic with it, and it's a kind of Germanic type eagle, which I hope will kind of make this lose its intended slightly Russian feel. But if you think about it, what is Russian about this really? And then I thought to myself, this gave me an idea, which I'll come to in a minute, which is that the Kador faction, this kind of Russian neo-Soviet type faction in Warmachine, have this triangle as their banner. And I thought, why couldn't we have that as a motif for this army, a kind of a more Englishy, Highlandy kind of feel of an army, where that triangle becomes a bit of a motif that goes across the army as a kind of religious symbol for some kind of, well, not the Trinity, because that's obviously apostasy, but, like the faith of the Seven from Game of Thrones, everything is the Seven this and by the Seven that. This could be by the 3.
You know, and then I could reappropriate these Skaven shields, because it is basically the same symbol. And then I could use these Skaven shields as kind of bucklers, which, as I understand it, are absolute terror in the hands of people who know how to wield them. And who better than Highland clansmen?
Like those Macedonian spearmen, pikemen, with those little shields, because they couldn't carry a bigger one because of the huge pike. And was the little shield called a hoplon? I don't know. Write in on a postcard.
And those could be their shields, making these feel a little bit different. Actually, we might as well move from your commander
to the line infantry of Sludge.
When you do your line infantry, is that they can either have musket volley and bayonets, crossbow volley and bayonets, or pole weapons. Oh, duh, I didn't need to give them shields, but you know what? It's decorative. And so what I thought I would do is I would take these barbarian bodies from Frostgrave, which I never really quite liked, because I actually only got them for the heads. They had some fantastic Germanic looking heads that I was going to use and have been using liberally across my various kitbashers, but the bodies didn't really impress me. And so what I thought I would do for these pole-armed sludge infantry is take the body of the barbarians, the arms from the Oathmark human infantry, slice off the top of what is a bit of a Muppet-like, frankly, flat-headed spear tip that I never thought was particularly convincing. It looked like a stage prop. Slice it off, and then get a load of these halberd tips from the Empire or Cities of Sigmar Games Workshop state infantry. Slice them off, because I wasn't using them anyway, because I used my line infantry, I used my Empire human infantry as swordsmen, and then just try and stick it on in as level a manner as I could. And it's worked reasonably well. Ah, yes, of course, the heads, the Tam O'Shanter heads. So they are from the Warlord Games North Africa British infantry sprue. And that head is a perfect size for this, I thought, perhaps on the slightly larger side. That head, a bit smaller, but I think still works all right. You know, these guys are very padded up because wherever they're from is cold. You know, they had cigarettes back in this Sludge universe. And what you're supposed to do actually is base them 3 onto, I think, a 40mm base, which looks fantastic. But seeing as it's going to take me a long time to get around to painting these, no doubt, I thought the best thing to do would be to just put them on normal 25mm bases. And the rules say, because they're very open-minded and miniatures agnostic, the rules say that it's okay to kind of group them in 3s. So that's one group of 3. And they look kind of, you know, the wind blowing across the mountains, wherever they're from.
Proper when shall we 3 meet again?
Kind of chic, you know, pose in a way that makes them look like they're about to do something dramatic, and or, as per Braveheart, I guess, switch sides in some kind of clan-like war and fights against the English. But he looks quite menacing. And the shields help make him look a bit different. Another group of 3. So even with the same head, you can still get 2 quite different results. I mean, that's the same head, but you know, if you don't sit them right next to each other, between the shields and the pole arms, they do look a bit different. I hate mold lines. It's a bane of my life. There's mold lines all over the place on particularly the Warlord World War II sprues. Now, you might ask, where did I get all these halberds from? So I foolishly paid £10 for a pack of 20 on eBay. But also, I put out a call on the Lead Adventure Forum, and 2 very nice people just sent me theirs. And I had a pack of my own, so I've now got plenty of these halberd tips. And one person, very kindly, I think his name's Chris, even kindly sent me the top of a Fireforge Northern Cavalry banner, which I very naughtily haven't pinned. This would need to be drilled there, and have a paperclip put here, a small piece of a paperclip. But I just thought, hey, plastic glue should just bond this, and so I've done it. But at some point, it is going to just snap off. But when that point comes, then I'll pin it. Fix and mend, as they say. And that's the last of our Highland brethren pole-armed dudes. But I also thought, let's have an experiment and see what they'll look like with the British World War II heads. Now, some, I think, go too far to have... I know we're talking about a universe where not all parts of technology have moved at a similar speed, you know, but they've got metal. So why can't they have netting? But I don't think that looks quite right. So I might rip that head off. But I forgot what they're called, these British steel hats from World War I, World War II. I thought they looked all right. He looks perfectly plausible. Not least seeing as there was a medieval helmet of that kind of style, which perhaps this was all based on. And the rest of them also madly in with this Trinity type religion. Well, they look all right. Let's get a better look. Again, a bit of a look of determination, at least on that face. This one, well, I suppose the English are a bit more purse-lipped. Again, perhaps a bit of a stereotype there. I thought the English heads weren't as good as the Scottish heads. Let's get a bit of focus there. And that's a banner, ooh, possibly from some kind of Games Workshop, like 3rd edition plastic Empire miniature. Sat in a bits box, waiting for its mission in life, now found. And there you go, that's a pole-armed line infantry. Let's move on to the foot knights. So what Sean thought was great fun would be to have a world with knights and marching Napoleonic units. Now that might sound ridiculous, but I'm sure that in Japan, based on my deep knowledge of their history and mostly watching The Last Samurai, you know, you had a period where the American black ships turned up, steamships. The Japanese realized time to modernize fast, given that we've been sitting slightly in our own little cultural bubble. But you still had, you know, a samurai class who had, even though technology had moved on around them, had retained a kind of a martial code and all their cool armor, whilst at the same time there were people, you know, I think a Frenchman brought in, not the American as per The Last Samurai, a Frenchman was brought in to kind of train up, you know, just basic infantrymen with muskets and drill codes and marching and all that. So they coexisted at the same time. So why not that in this world? And these also are the Frostgrave Knights, which I never rated. I always thought they looked awful. And why did I buy them, you might ask? And the answer is it was a cock-up. I thought that the heads would be very good. And they weren't. They were all a bit on the small side, and mostly they weren't that great. And I looked at the bodies and I thought, these don't look properly medieval. They look a bit weird. You know, they look like weekend reenactors. You know, with a bit of medieval armour there, and then something bought from Primark on top. But actually, that's just perfect for Sludge, because you want them to look a little bit
Steampunk.
and I thought that was perfect, and I used these old Games Workshop shields, which I thought weren't good for anything really anymore, but you know, that was the point of this project. It was to use what I've got. And so actually, so I also took, I think, some Fireforge helmets. So that's a Fireforge medieval helmet. That I think to be, and so is that. That's from the Teuton pack, making it look pretty menacing. That's from the Oathmark Human Infantry set. And then I think these, well, that's another Oathmark Human Infantry head, but that one, let's get a better look, sorry, it's hard to focus here. That one, and that one, and that one are actually from the Frostgrave Human Knights. Now, you are only supposed to have Foot Knights consist of between 3 and 6 figures at 10 points each, and they are an elite unit choice. So you can have up to a maximum of 6. So that would be it. But actually, there's something quite cool in this game, which is bodyguards. So I believe your officer or your commander can take 2 bodyguards for 10 points each, which actually corresponds with the knight point, doesn't it? Each bodyguard increases wounds by +1 and knightly arms burst, I imagine your attacks, by 2. Bodyguards count as the same figures as the commander and may be modelled on the same base or separately, and they're not removed till he's destroyed. So actually what I might do, look at that gleaming light. So he might just have these guys just walking around behind him, giving him a greater sense of presence, leadership presence. And why not? Artillery, firing a field gun. The rough-hewn lands of the decaying world limit the mobility of major artillery batteries. Large-scale deployment is generally reserved for sieges, but cunning commanders usually have a little bit of horse artillery at their disposal. A carefully deployed field gun can cause mayhem, basically. And the rules, which I haven't read properly, do remind me of Empire 7th edition, where you had to kind of guess a range and the artillery ball would bounce. The artillery shot bounce distance will stop when it hits specific terrain pieces. When you hit a terrain feature that looks like it would stop a cannonball. Discuss any strange features with your opponent without insulting them, I guess. And what I did here was, I thought that this Horde's Trollblood little cannon sounded perfect. It was sitting there with nothing to do in its life in a pack, and I assembled it, and I can tell you it was very painful to assemble. I'd forgotten how painful metal generally was to assemble, but particularly if the pieces don't just clip together. And I stuck a few Empire bits on it. You know, was that sensible? Just makes my life harder. I mean, that looks quite fiddly to paint, but I'm thinking bit of bolt gun metal, bit of black, and a wash, and very limited highlights. And I know these have teeth, but you know, maybe the Highlanders in this fantasy universe are just savages and they just want to show that they've ripped them off a shark or a troll or something. So what I did was, I just took some Empire artillery bits and sandwiched them on in a highly elegant manner onto this Oathmark human infantryman with his British World War II warlord head. This one I'm not sure is all that plausible. I'm not sure who he's threatening. Looks like someone's insulted his mum or something. Or a troll has walked up and is starting to threaten. He's saying, if you want a piece of me, go for it, mate. And that's from the Empire Warhammer handgun sprue. That's from the Outrider sprue. Now, I know it looks like a giant pistol, but if you ever go to these museums these Renaissance pistols were pretty gigantic, because his hand is basically the same size as an Oathmark sword hand. And that's on an Oathmark human infantry body with an extra little satchel there on his front man bag, just to give him a greater sense of technology, that merging of this ancient, well not ancient, high medieval fantasy and steampunk type world. In the spirit of, what do I do with all this stuff? Can I use it for Sludge? I thought, was this just a ridiculous idea? It seemed a good one in my head. So this guy's a huge ogre. Well, I say huge, a big ogre in Sirius or French style armor. Designed for, can you guess? Well, obviously Blood Bowl, and he's running to kick the ball. And I thought, what if we had an engineer who decided that instead of using gunpowder, they'd just get Beefcake over here to hoof these balls into enemy massed ranks. And there they are, a little box. I mean, I didn't really think too carefully about making them look the same size, but once they're all painted silver, will anyone really be able to tell? And he could be one cannon, and that could be another cannon. Although I'm not sure you need two.
And so what's next for these guys? Well, probably more line infantry. The options, I think, would be to get these Prussian Landwehr by Warlord Games and either remove the heads. Actually, you can slot the heads in, so I might put in and see if they fit the British heads or even the Scottish heads from the Warlord Games World War II North Africa sprue. Or frankly, because the issue there is, you need a collar, and the collar is attached to the head, and they might look quite weird in these big overcoats without a collar. And so I might just leave these guys with their Feldmütze, what are they called? Field caps, probably, and just use them. Maybe I would carve off the cross. Maybe I wouldn't. I mean, they look quite steampunk anyway, these guys, particularly the dude with the beard. And cavalry, well, these Oathmark ones are an idea. Maybe I would get, I might carve off the silly flat-headed spears and put something a bit sharper and more horrible there. I mean, I've got these Greek spears from the Mortal Gods Victrix sprue, and maybe they would make these look a bit more menacing and a bit longer, and I could put on these Scottish or British heads and not bother with the shields. And for wizards, I've got loads of wizards. I'm thinking one of the old plastic GW ones I've got to assemble. But either way, I think we'll leave it there for tonight. So it's good night there from the lads. Please like if you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching to the end. Comment if you want to offer any thoughts about how plausible you thought this all was, or any other great ideas you have for kit bashing for Sludge. And please subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. I don't promise to paint these guys soon, but one day I hope to get there. Wherever you are in the world, keep safe. Cheers.